There was some buzz in the Chia community yesterday. There was a paper that was found that was submitted by some researchers talking about using the Chia blockchain at the Department of Defense or at a conference that was related to the DoD. Did you get a chance to look through this yet, Lucas?
I did look through it. I thought that they're actually on to. I mean, I think it's a good use case for Chia for the security of Chia's consensus. A good use for virtual private blockchains. What did you think about it?
The thing that immediately stuck out to me after reading the paper was that this looked like really out of date information related to the current state of affairs on Chia. You know, if you look at what he's saying about the consensus mechanisms and how it's currently working, it doesn't talk about compression and GPUs and some of this other stuff, which I thought was a little surprising. You know, if this is a paper that's written fairly recently, you know, this was submitted June, and it doesn't talk about compression and GPUs and the current state of affairs and the next phase of, you know, how the plot format is going to work. It just seemed out of date. I don't know. It's almost like the only thing that this researcher did was read the green paper, the white paper, or whatever, and then this talk about the virtual private blockchains. Again, this seemed a little strange to me that it was kind of focused on as being one of the important parts of this. But then when we asked Gene about virtual private blockchains, he kind of downplayed that importance and said, that's not really a thing. This isn't anything that even matters. Do you recall that from our conversation with Gene?
I do recall him saying that, but I didn't know if that was just because they weren't focusing on it or because they didn't have any if they didn't have any demand for it right now. Um I don't know. I guess the aspect that I thought more interesting, we've talked about this narrative about Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset and how it's much more important to be putting government on blockchain in different ways. And I was glad to see members of the defense, you know, I don't know, of the defense industry thinking about moving over. I mean, we know that and Rusty, you might know this better than any of us. We know that the military is great at keeping records, for procurement, et cetera, et cetera. But somewhere through there, they seem to lose billions and trillions of dollars. So I was glad to see them looking at putting their purchasing and some of the records that they're keeping on blockchain, not just thinking about the government holding some sort of strategic Bitcoin reserve. So I guess that's the part that I thought important. I wondered if they had a broad grasp or had been in contact with CNI about using Chia, but I was also glad to see that they were attracted to the secure aspects of Chia also. Although they did not get into Lisp, which I thought was interesting too.
It's shocking. It's like when they talk about smart contract programming, don't even mention Chia Lisp. Don't even mention that it's built for auditability or anything related to that. And then some of the usage of this survey of other chains, right? Which is what I've currently got pulled up on the screen here. You know, it's like Ethereum, Cardano, stellar lumens. When was the last time you heard anybody talk about stellar lumens? I mean, really? Like, look at this. Again, it's like this is so weirdly written and so out of touch with the current state of affairs in the world of blockchains. I mean, to refer to Ripple and Stellar as private blockchains, what is that even supposed to mean?
Well, and I didn't even look at the publication date of this paper. I assumed that you had stumbled across it in a lead up to our discussion about soft war. Um, Was this recently published?
I mean, it was published into the conference on June 2024.
Oh wow.
So I mean, this is relatively recent,
Oh, um,
and I don't think that this was like a DoD sponsored paper or anything like that. I mean, I think it's these two researchers who had a chance to look up and try to find out a little bit more about these guys. Mark Rice, he seems to be a professor at the Air Force, and Ethan Schofeld, I think he's a master's student. So this bears a little bit more investigation as far as what this really means, and if this is somebody who's well versed in Chia or somebody who happened to stumble upon the green paper, read through it, and said, "Oh, this seems like this could be interesting for the DoD." And I don't know exactly how this paper got submitted, but we'll have to cover this a bit more detail if I'm capable of getting in touch with either of these researchers and digging in a bit more detail. Who knows? Maybe they'd be willing to come on the show and talk about their
well,
thoughts related to.
I mean, that would be awesome. And I also am somewhat familiar with that aspect of the Air Force. I've mentioned my grandfather was a colonel, and he actually started in the 50s when the Air Force began. I believe that was his first assignment was procurement of radios for the Air Force. Um, he had originally been in the Navy when the United States created the Air Force. So I guess that's what on this very first page I saw Air Force Institute of Technology, um, and I was a little bit familiar with it. So which I think used to be also the New Jersey Institute of Technology is what that started from. But um,
Yeah, here's Mark Rice. He's the assistant professor at the Air Force.
yeah. Well, I'm glad they're looking at Chia. I think it is a high use case of blockchain to be uh, to be to be putting the procurement chain and some of the records that the Air Force keeps. I mean, there's also the aspect of time wear on their different equipment. I know they keep extensive databases on every aircraft, etc. So they might be thinking along those lines too. And again, I think a blockchain, whether public or private, is I guess I'm sure they'll want private blockchain, but I kind of prefer they were on a public blockchain. But whatever. Yeah, it would be very interesting if we could, if you get in touch with them, if they'd be interested in coming in and talking about where their interest is with regards to Chia and what sort of applications they could tell us that they would be looking at using it for. Going back to also the comments that Gene made in regard with it, I don't because you were more engaged in that aspect of the conversation. Do you remember offhand what led into his remark with regards to the virtual private blockchains?
It was just a question that I directly asked him because I haven't heard about it much, and I was trying to probe for, is this one of the things that's being used by whatever companies that have been asking Chia for assistance in the enterprise capacity, or how they may be engaging with customers. And I thought, well, is this one of the products that we're not really hearing about? And I mean, he basically just said no, like we're not really doing that. And anytime we really have conversations with people, it's the public aspect that actually makes it compelling. And that was part of the reason why I thought it was weird that this was focused on it, because in one part of the paper, it talks about if you're going to use a blockchain, the public aspect is what's important because you might as well just use a database. But then flipped back to the private blockchain thing and freedom of information requests. It just it just didn't make coherent sense to me. I think this is a bit of a red herring as far as us being excited about the DoD using Chia or trying to get it too excited about it. My take on this is I think this paper was submitted. It was a novel, interesting look at a piece of technology, but I don't think it really considered the current state of affairs. I don't think it was written by somebody who has a deep understanding of Chia and the technology. And I think it would be interesting to have this person, really get more in touch with the community and the technology. And if it, has the ability to push this narrative forward, that's a great wedge. But otherwise, I don't think this is some, revelatory thing that says, hey, we should expect to see the DoD suddenly start using Chia. Like I'm not sure that's really where this ends up.
I know in our conversation with Gene, we also talked about DIDs and verifiable credentials. And it would seem to me that they might be, and this is a question to you because I might be way wrong here, but due to the sort of like zero knowledge proof, the revelation of what information you want revealed, are is do you think CNI is focusing on the DID VCs and thinking like that um, those aspects will be technology they can then use for the virtual private blockchains, or is it just that they think it's dead in the water because nobody was interested in it?
Well, when we talked about decentralized identities and verifiable credentials, it sounded like there was feedback specifically from customers related to the use of those technologies and that it needed improvements directly because of certain aspects of when it got tried to be when it was tried to be used in the way that they wanted to use it. There were deficiencies in the way that the smart contracts and Chia list was written. So I think that was my takeaway from what Gene had said. So I think it needs to be revisited because of direct customer feedback,
Can
which he
you
then tried to probe Bram about, but he didn't have a comment on it.
Well, I vaguely remember Bram mentioning virtual private blockchains and something with Merkle trees, and I got a little bit lost there. Can you kind of describe Chia's idea of how the virtual private blockchains were to work?
I mean, that's essentially what I had asked Gene about, and I didn't get a strong answer on it. It was like he sidestepped it, and it's technology that I've never really had a sense of what they were really doing there. So that yeah, I don't know that one to me. I don't have a strong answer for it. It was one of the reasons why I asked the question to Gene in the first place. So it was weird to see it come up again in this, but maybe that's a part of the clue, or maybe if there's anything to be investigated here, it's to try and dig into this further. It's like, why is this guy at the DoD focusing on technology that Gene essentially said was something that wasn't really that interesting or not something to focus on?
Well, maybe he needs to be listening to FOMO, so he's aware of that. Or I can't imagine somebody with deeper pockets than the defense industry if they wanted to spur that on. So
I
maybe.
just don't think it was sponsored though. I don't think they paid for it. I don't think this was something where they said, "Hey, here's a budget and you go look into it." I mean, it's such a short paper too compared to something like software, which is I think Lowry actually, had budget to come up with that stuff, didn't he?
Uh, let's not talk about software till tomorrow. I don't want to go on a
We'll
tangent
focus we'll
about
focus on that more tomorrow. I'm just saying like relative length, right? If you look at the size of the paper, right? This thing is, just a few pages. It's like a 6-page paper and there's only a couple of paragraphs for each idea. So it's really really short. I mean really short and thin on details. Like it's a brief summary of what's going on in Chia and it's a very out of date view and summary of Chia.
Well, but at the same time, we live in the world of Chia. We live in the world of crypto. I would, if this professor or these two professors might have a much deeper understanding, and were merely trying to crack the door and not want to overwhelm those who are interested in it, or those who they were trying to get interested in it. So I would love it if we could get them on at some point to talk about it. And again, I do think that putting some of the information that well, I think putting all the information that the government keeps on blockchain would be a great use case of blockchain being able to. You spoke earlier of FOIA and open information. I don't believe in secrets, so I think it would be a great use, and we know that Chia has a higher Nakamoto consensus efficiency or Nakamoto consensus rating than other blockchains. So why wouldn't the DoD be looking at us or looking at Chia? But I don't know what else we have to discuss about this. Do we want to move on to Tulsi?
Yeah, let's move on.
So if no one, if people have not heard of what was going on with Tulsi Gabbard, and is she the senator from Ohio? I think that's her current position. I should have looked it up. I do believe she's a senator from Ohio. I'm sorry, Ohio, from Hawaii, and has had an interesting career in politics. She was a Democrat. I do believe she's either an independent or a Republican now. Caused quite a stir back whenever she switched parties, and moreover, she maybe she didn't switch parties. Because I remember that she ran for the Democratic. She ran for the Democratic nomination back in 2020. But either way, I woke up this morning and I saw that several whistleblowers had reported that Tulsi Gabbard has been put on a terrorist watch list. And that terrorist watch list includes accompaniment of several agents on any flight that she takes. Did you read anything about it, Grant? Well, you're probably actually looking it up right now.
Yeah, he might be taking a chance to get that up on the screen. I haven't really heard too much about it, Lucas, but it does sound like a very interesting conversation and something that would be good to cover on the space.
Well, I think it's. I mean,
yeah, I was getting pulled up. Sorry, it took me a second. Took me a minute because I had to refresh the login and whatever because of the new restrictions on X. So sometimes if I don't catch it, that I've been errantly logged out, whatever, and it takes me a minute to pull it back up. But yeah, I was watching this, and it seemed very strange to put somebody like this on a terrorist watch list. Shocking.
Well, and chilling. And when you think about the friction between her and the Biden and Harris administration, that the Biden administration are I mean, let's just say the president is at the is the authority over this the DOJ and these terrorist watch lists. It's staggering to think also with her position in government that she is that she's been put on it. What better way to what better way to bully your opponents than by putting them by, I don't know, dogging their heels and
it seems almost like retaliation against her defect from the Democratic Party, right? I mean, if you recall.
Absolutely. And Yeah, I mean, she's a member of government. Oh, she's in the House. I thought she had become their senator.
She was in the House, and then I think she's been out of Congress for a little while, so I don't know what she's doing currently. Maybe I'll scroll down in Wikipedia and see if we can't find out exactly what she's up to right now. But yeah, she hasn't been in Congress for a little bit.
Oh, okay. Well, regardless, it's she has an outside voice. She has contact. She also has a history of military service too, which I don't know the details of because I just saw this before we opened the show, but I wanted to talk about it. Um, and not only that, but the other thing that came to my mind was when Harris's name was floated as, or when Harris was somehow nominated, or was past the Democratic nomination, even though, or the presumptive nomination of the Democratic Party to run against Trump, and Bobby Kennedy. I saw a lot of clips of her her arguments with Kamala Harris back in the Democratic debates. And there's a specific one in which she makes a call out of Kamala Harris laughing about her marijuana use, and then serving as the district attorney, or in the district attorney's office in San Francisco, and incarcerating thousands of people for marijuana use. And so that was a prominent video circulating about Harris leading into this too. So I don't know how long that she's been on the terrorist watch list, but yeah, it's pretty damning to think that the Biden administration has set the DOJ on Trump, restricted or denied Secret Service protection for both Trump and Bobby Kennedy, and now to be engaging in this sort of hijinks is that's a lot of strikes against them.
Yeah, for somebody who had put their hat in the ring for president and then become a political commentator critical of the Democratic Party, to see this sort of a thing happen. I mean, is it really plausible that in her time after being a part of the House of Representatives that she would have been started to be part of the revolutionaries and terrorists? Seems unlikely.
I mean, even in a broad, I don't know, on a broader, is it appropriate to be surveilling any American? I mean, we saw the repassage of the Patriot Act earlier this year, a dispensation Congress gave themselves, but now domestic wiretapping is available without a warrant. So it's kind of unnerving, and also to think of the not to beat a dead horse, but the coup continues in Venezuela, or the attempted coup continues in Venezuela, Peru, and Argentina. The United States government is shameless anymore, is absolutely shameless. And maybe it always was, but I would not have, I don't know. I guess maybe I would have believed it since the war on terror, the Patriot Act, originally began. But rather than walking back or fixing some of these depredations of liberty that we've engaged in, now even politicians are game. So, cheerful Monday.
Yeah, interesting developments for sure.
So I wonder if Ron Paul can fly to Washington D.C. without a surveillance detail. Also, who knows?
It really begs the question of who else is on this list.
Well, that's actually, absolutely what I was getting at. Is Matt Gaetz on this list? Is Thomas Massey on this list?
Josh Hawley. I mean, who else could possibly be on the list?
Bring up Josh Hawley. Interesting character. Are other Democrats on the list? I mean, and I haven't been one to throw stones at the nomination of Kamala Harris, because I think it's very important for us to remember that the political parties and what they do are not actually government, and not only that, but it's a slippery slope to start talking about quote unquote democracy. Look at how we've used supposed ideals of democracy to delegitimize candidates and regimes in other countries. But you put it all together, and it's very disgusting to see. So, I don't know if Tulsi Gabbard has made any remarks in response to this, but she has to know about it. I wonder what it was like the first time she got on a plane and had a surveillance detail accompanying her on that aircraft. So, did you, speaking of also security and flying, post 9/11, we created Department of Homeland Security because prior to that, there had been an expectation that private companies were, the airline carriers were in charge of security and were going to provide for that. And they weren't necessarily interested in it. They took the route of banks. Like, why is there no security in banks? They only keep $8,000 in the vault, and we print a couple $1 million a minute now. So if at most you can lose $8,000 in a day from a bank branch, and you're printing millions and millions of dollars, it's a different way to look and think about security. But Crowdstrike, did you see that Crowdstrike and Delta that Crowdstrike had declared that it is not, or has minimum liability with regards to the Delta flights that were canceled? Did you see that?
No. Okay, now you're making me want to go look that up right away. Hold on a second.
Okay, go look that up. I'll sum it up. Delta, or Crowdstrike, has claimed that they do not have liability for the flights that were canceled with regards to Delta, on the basis that they offered supports to go out and fix all the kiosks whenever it happened. So I don't know what the numbers were or are on the number of people that they offered to go and to reboot these machines and get Delta back up and running. But I guess Delta denied or did not accept CrowdStrike's offer of support for it. So why would Delta do that? Was the question that hit me.
I don't know why they wouldn't have done it, but maybe it could have just been, just how much work would have had been done to actually fix it. Because as Grant was explaining when this first happened, the incident was like, in order to fix the problem, he had to reboot the main kiosk or computer itself, and then load it and take away the file on each individual kiosk. And you think about doing that, how many airports are in each different city, and then how many kiosks are in each airport? That could just be a substantial amount of work that they might not have been willing to take on.
Well, but to me,
this looks like posturing. I mean, of course they're gonna say this. Sorry, just digging deeper into this, right? It's like free consulting advice to help. Okay, yes, you gave guidance on how to fix it, but it doesn't change the fact that your faulty software update caused a massive outage, and that this isn't within the scope of like what the software was supposed to do. It's supposed to identify threats. It's not supposed to crash your entire fleet of machines. And even if they had said, yeah, we can go out there and help, it's like, okay, sure, maybe offering to do that, but like it doesn't it doesn't change the fact that you still have to do it, you know?
Well, I thought they actually offered people to go and to reboot. I didn't realize it was just free consulting advice. Um,
Yeah, that's from Reuters. So maybe there was a different one that.
well,
Yeah.
still, I look at the length of the delays that Delta had. I'm not sure how long they were for American and for other carriers. I know that Southwest seemed to be running. You know, not to jump around all day today either, but something that nobody is talking about that comes to mind as we mention this is the Boeing spaceship that is out at the International Space Station right now. It's been there for 2 months and apparently isn't going to be coming back anytime soon, if at all. And it looks like NASA is now talking with SpaceX, with Elon Musk's company, to bring those astronauts back. But just to keep it on Delta, I don't know. There's a finite number of computers. I mean, sure, it seems all complex or staggering in the number of carriers, but you would have thought that they could at least get their hubs back going, and some of their primary routes going. I don't even know how long the outage lasted. Ended up, I quit paying attention after 4 days. After 4 days, I was it was mind-boggling that you couldn't have this um, have some of the systems back up in a couple of hours. Half a day, maybe 3/4 of a day. 4 days, unbelievable. So. Um,
That does bring up an interesting thing as far as the shortening of the news cycles and how fast things fall out of, you know, our contemplation of things, right? Like, remember when Trump was in New York City and he was fighting these fraud charges for, mispricing his properties and whatnot, and there was this big flap about how big of a bond he was going to have to pay, $454 million, and it settled for this, that, and the other thing, and then all of a sudden that just went away. Like, whatever happened with that? There's a variety of news stories that are kind of like this where we focus on it for a day, two, whatever, and then it falls off because we're thinking about something else. And what happens to the follow up? Like whatever ended up did happening with Delta? Did they get this all resolved? Are flights behaving normally? Like it's just it almost seems like that this is one of the main faults of journalism. Everybody wants to break a story. Everybody wants to talk about it at the beginning, but when we finally get down to the resolution and what really happened, or picking up the pieces, that's the thing that gets lost. And I think that that's actually probably one of the most important parts, is to say, well, what really happened here, and what's the conclusion and what's the outcome of this story, rather than asking the question and then letting it drop.
Well, I think a lot of it is we don't have a filter anymore for what's important, and even the narrative with what was going on with the Trump trial. I think part of what happened with the Trump trial too is that it got set aside. I think for the sentencing of it was put off till September, and then of course there was the Supreme Court rulings and the Trump v. I can't remember the one that reaffirmed presidential immunity for official acts. Settled with a cash promise. I thought it was put off till September.
See, that's what I mean. Like, this stuff just gets lost. I almost feel like we should take some time to find the follow-ups, get the outputs. Like, if there's anything we could start to help do with the news cycle, it's not just to grab onto the latest headlines, but rather give a little bit of thoughtful follow-up if it's at all possible, because I think that's lacking. It's needed.
I would agree. I would agree. I get a little bit exhausted with the cases before Trump. I know that the Florida one, on the day after the Supreme Court ruling, the judge threw that case out, so that one's gone. Georgia is still holding the RICO case against him, and Georgia is still holding. And there's also still an interesting uh, disagreement with regards to still the 2020 votes and the vote counts for Fulton County. There's also been drama added to that one with regards to what was going on with the prosecutor Fannie. I forget her full name, but some of the improprieties going on in the district attorney's office. But still also an all-out fight with Brian Kemp, between Trump and Brian Kemp, and he has maintained that nothing was wrong with the Georgia election, and the fact that 3 counts were made, none of them added up. But there's nothing to see here, no problems to be had.
Well, I mean, that may be part of why it's so scattered like this too, right? I mean, was this a real thing or not? And if it was sort of a straw man, or if it was intended to deflect or to see what could be made to stick, and it didn't happen, then it's sort of a non-issue, right? Maybe that's part of the reason why you see these news cycles flop so fast, is it's trying to see what they can make stick. It's a clear attempt to, try to get Trump out of the race with some kind of a, lawsuit, and that didn't work. But even somebody like Alina Habba, I mean, this person's name was mentioned daily for a long time, and then all of a sudden, just nothing. It just is. It speaks to the way that our news cycles run, is that we can't stay focused and can't hold a story for more than a week to 2 weeks and follow it to its termination.
Well, maybe the news cycle is also smarter than the politicians, because it was political. The charges against Trump, especially in the Georgia case, were politically motivated. I mean, look to the history of RICO and where RICO even comes from. RICO was originally brought at a federal level. You have to wonder why a state would rely on RICO, on communication and conspiracy, and charges against communication and conspiracy, whenever it has authority over the businesses. RICO, by the way, goes back to trying to pin down the mob. And you know me, I don't like to think about terms of like, quote unquote corruption, etc. Because if you're thinking about politics, like everyone has a voice. It's very interesting to me that the federal government brought charges against the mob. I don't want to excuse the things that they're doing, but I also think that you get into sticky territory when you think about I don't know, the religious affiliations and assumptions that are made, like who gets to select winners, et cetera, in Portland, Rhode Island. Who was the mayor? But who was the mayor back in Portland? I don't know. I don't want to go off on that tangent. But
Well, what was your thoughts on bringing up RICO? Because you think that this is a way that has been used against certain organizations, and did it come to mind because of like trying to bring it up against the entire Trump organization of various businesses?
I think it's very, very, very dangerous for government to get away from punishing acts and to get into suppositions about what is going on in people's minds, and also what is going on with communication, and that RICO like relies on, and even a lot of federal charges rely on conspiracy to commit or communication, because their jurisdiction is limited to commerce and things that cross state lines. And so to be the states have much more powerful charges because they have control over properties, land, and bodies. And so they can charge for murder. The federal government can't charge for murder. It has to charge for conspiracy to commit murder. And we should be asking ourselves, like, where don't we have the protection of the Fifth Amendment? Don't who can, if you can begin to make a supposition as to what was going on in someone's mind whenever they committed a crime, rather than just punishing the commission of the crime, or the act of then you've gone down a slippery road. I mean, like we talk about hate crimes now, and we don't pause to ask ourselves, like, wasn't the crime enough? Like, why are we beginning to make suppositions about what the intent of the person was? And I mean, we even do that with a lesser degree with the varying degrees of charges that we make, for manslaughter, first degree murder, second degree murder, et cetera, et cetera. But we should remember that in our mind, that the government does best when it's especially in criminal proceedings that are relying on prosecutors and prosecutorial discretion, that it should be we should be sticking to things that have happened and things that we can prove that have happened.
So when I think about the Fifth Amendment, I usually think it's like, this is like what, your right to remain silent, that you don't have to testify against yourself. So this is pleading the Fifth. How does this pertain to securing our communications? Like, what were you thinking there as far as why this protects our ability to talk to each other and not be brought up on RICO charges for conspiring?
Well, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself.
Right. So this is where you can say, I'm just not going to talk about that. I'm going to remain silent.
Yes.
Plead the Fifth.
That's, pleading the Fifth is not, and the reason, I mean, think also about, I mean, so also think of the Fourth Amendment and search and seizure, the Wilkes Amendment, as it's called. Torturing people and well, again, like, also think of what's been done with Tulsi Gabbard. There's different ways that you can intimidate people. And you can also use the court system to intimidate. You can use the legal process to intimidate people, and so Madison also did not want the Bill of Rights to be seen as amendments to the Constitution. He wanted the Bill of Rights to be rules for the legal, the judicial process of the United States. And somehow that got interpreted as, well, let's just tack them on to the end of the Constitution. But notice that the Constitution is rules between the states, and then you jump over to the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, and some of the other amendments behind, and they are rules with regards to government versus the citizens. But government has an outsized power. There's more people that exist in the government. There's more people in, even in a county. There's more deputies, and
I don't think the framers of the Constitution ever could have imagined the size to which this loose confederation of states would have grown into this massive behemoth that is the current incarnation of that, and the massive federalization and centralization of federal powers. I just don't think it was contemplated, especially for some of the ways that it's written. I mean, this could be applied to electronic communications, but it's woefully inadequate. I think that's even spoken to with Kennedy's recent speech, right, where he says the ability to remove somebody from the world of economics, right? To take away a bank account, to take away your ability to transact, to take away your access to your wealth, right? It seems like this was kind of pointed in that direction to say you're secure in your papers, you're secure in your house, you're secure against warrants. But like how that's executed today is your bank accounts can be seized, you can be frozen out of the ability to transact inside the normal course of affairs. And it almost seems like we're due for a, you know, an update on some of this language to ensure that it is more encompassing of what happens in today's world.
Well, and there was, you know, what always amazes me is there were many founders who were very worried about exactly these things happening. And even Madison, even though he saw the wisdom in limiting the judiciary, understood what writing it down and adding rules for the judiciary to rules for the states, how that could be corrupted in the future. And we have RICO today. We we torture. I mean, we extraordinarily indict and abuse both the jurisdiction of the military and the and civilian court system to give ourselves permission to torture people and hold them, you know, incarcerated for 20 years. Nobody even thinks to say anything about that, except when and now I'm talking about
just to focus on this for a second. Should Sam Bankman-Fried and the rest of his cadre have been charged with RICO? Because, you know, I don't know a ton about RICO. I'm sort of just listening to you talking about it and also just reading through some of the stuff in the Wikipedia article. But it sure seems like what happened with FTX should have been applied, should have had the RICO statutes applied to it. But it also seems like way out of date. It's like a $25,000 fine.
I mean, I lean towards the notion of capitalism being allowing people to fail. And when it comes to finance or banking, like the government can put forth ideas with regards to disclosure and what disclosure expectations can be. But I think that Sam Bankman, you know, Bernie Madoff, like people who engage in financial crimes, like part of the law should be bared by the people who trusted them, or borne by the people who trusted them. And not only that, but we have criminal and civil courts. It should be up to the people who were made losers by that system to seek redress or to be made whole in a civil court. And part of the argument that you're going to get from those people who say no, we should make a rule and we should make that criminal, is that they're going to say, well, you know, what about poor grandmothers and poor people who also are ignorant and also don't have the money or the time or the wherewithal to drag someone who's taken advantage of them to court. And I say, well, that's a bigger problem, and we should be taking care of that problem. But whenever
Interestingly enough, I don't know if you saw it as I was scrolling through this, Trump's been brought up on RICO charges twice.
Yeah, well, I you know, like RICO charges seem very handy for enemies of the government.
It sure seems like it. It sure seems like it.
So
Like just reading through like how it's been applied and what it's been used, it's certainly seems to be a tool used in that direction.
and if you want, I mean, again, like those should be I'm not saying that the actions of everybody are morally right, but we ought to keep government restricted to both actions and actions that harm bodies and or take property. Like government should be concerned with protecting its citizens, and in protecting its citizens, it should be thinking about harm to their bodies, and and also about property rights. You know, do you own it? Does it go into your hands? But when it comes to money, there's nothing behind money. And this also, going back to this notion of letting things fail, like then we have a better memory of what the true value of things are. If the government is there always to buy the line of the inflated value of things, and to reinforce that accounting or that narrative of what something was worth, um, then it also at some point has to start printing money to make everybody whole, or taking more money from everybody else, and that traps us in the narrative of crooks and thieves.
And I guess not shockingly, but there was a lawsuit for racketeering against Sam Bankman-Fried. I'm not sure what happened with this lawsuit, but
Well, I think that it won, and the people who were holding assets in FTX, we have these ideas of, and now I can't think of it, but a whole bunch of people get together for a lawsuit. What the word is what is it when you have a whole bunch of defendants who are bundled all together?
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Something action lawsuit, class action. We have class action lawsuits now. And yay, like, because if there are a whole bunch of people who have been defrauded altogether, I mean, this is nothing new. There are ditches and gold mines in Colorado that were sold to poor people in London for penny stocks. That it would have been nice if all of those stockholders in the UK could have gotten together and sued somebody who walked off with a couple $100,000 to buy a ranch in the western lands of the United States back in the 1880s. But how did this class action lawsuit pay out? Well, if I remember correctly, I was a little upset at the time, because I said, it's so interesting how in crypto, the minnows are made whole and the whales are sacrificed. And yet in traditional finance, the whales are made whole, hashtag Silicon Valley Bank and the bailouts that were made there, and countless other times that whales are made whole. But, small cap holders in FTX got their money returned to them, and people who had a large amount of money in FTX got pennies back for the money that they had invested in FTX. And I think it gets a little bit more convoluted whenever you see that investors and people in finance, and as the government was trying to change its narrative with regards to whether crypto was for drug dealers and nefarious people, and trying to move towards opening up crypto, had selected FTX as to be their sort of regulated institution. We saw pictures of Sam Bankman-Fried and Maxine Waters, the chair or the member of the House Financial Services Committee, and FTX gave lots and lots of money to politicians that the politicians didn't necessarily have to give back. Some of them did. Some have already spent it.
Did they have to give it back?
No, they didn't. They didn't have to give it back. If they took it in good faith, then
no. I think there's still a rule that applies in that situation, that if money is distributed as a result of criminal activity, that it gets clawed back. I can't remember the exact term for that, but there is a rule, and it was supposed to all get pulled back out of the hands of those politicians, but it didn't. And again, it's just another one of those. Well, I guess we have laws, but they don't necessarily have to be applied unless people really want to apply them.
Right. I think maybe the word is welched. Yeah. Well, going back to RICO and or I don't even know. We've wandered all over the map today, but I think RICO is can be used is a very dangerous tool to put in the hands of government, and I think that I wish that we had an expectation of our legislative representatives to talk about making the game fair and stop talking about protecting the financial interests of poor people. They should be using the rules about property ownership and land ownership to make the playing ground fair for everybody, rather than trying to regulate the financial industry and I mean, look at what how the SEC works. You know, when the SEC sues a financial organization, do the people who were wronged get the money? No, the SEC does. That's how they get paid. So we've got lots of problems with
this. Isn't exactly the term I was thinking of, but it almost applies. Disgorgement, but there's like another one where if you give out money that was a result of theft or criminal activity, that money can be reclaimed.
I don't know. Disgorgement makes me think of a particularly green emoticon. I think I don't know what else is on my mind today. Still anti-RICO, and
Well, we are getting close to the top of the hour. You know, it's a good thing to wrap up the day and get our final thoughts in and see how people are doing from Monday. Did you guys have a good weekend? Anything in particular happened to you guys specifically?
I had a pretty quiet weekend. I was reading Soft War, which I think, are we getting into Soft War tomorrow, Grant? Because mainly
tomorrow. Yep, tomorrow.
Is it tomorrow? Okay, well, and I've tried to not talk about Soft War today, but it's been heavily on my mind. So we'll dig into aspects about it tomorrow. But that's what I was up to. It's a lot longer than I thought it was. Joy.
Well, I can't wait for that conversation tomorrow. But yeah, we'll see everybody tomorrow on FOMO.
All right, till tomorrow.